Quentin, welcome to 700 WLW.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
Okay, up front, got to be honest with you here. Both of my children are prosecutors, so I know of what you come from, and I know you're on the other side of the equation right now. But someone who remembers this day in 1981 vividly, and who understands that this person, in this case John Warnock Hinckley, was incarcerated and was under medical care and was under health watch and all that, declared, I believe, not guilty for reason of insanity. How did he suddenly become sane again in the eyes of a judge?
Well, there was an 8-week trial in 82, as many of may remember. Some weren't born then yet, it's true. But the jury at that time heard from a whole bevy of experts, Harvard and Yale people on both sides of it, and they decided at the end of that trial that he was not guilty by reason of insanity. Beginning in about 2001, Judge Paul Friedman has taken over the supervision of Hinckley, and gradually he's expanding his freedoms and letting him out a little more. And most recently, he's been out as long as 17 days at a time. A lot of people don't realize that. And generally, he's done pretty well. And the judge, Friedman, just signed a 103-page order where he found, after testimony from experts and Hinckley's treaters, that Hinckley didn't have any signs of psychotic symptoms, delusional thinking, or any violent tendencies.
But yet,
so he's going to
go
ahead.
No, I was going to say, but yet, I believe that the government pointed out when Judge Friedman took this case, and when the possibility of what he did on Wednesday looked like it was going to become real, they pointed out that he had been released several times and told the people that he had to report to he was going to do one thing and then wound up doing something else. It wasn't egregious. I think he was going to go visit a friend and instead went to visit a bookstore or something like that. But still, they caught the guy in a couple of lies, did they not?
That's right. The Secret Service has followed him literally hundreds of times when he's been out. And no doubt the Secret Service is not happy about this because, one of his conditions is he has to stay away from the current president, current members of Congress, and Jodie Foster, who he had the obsession with. So the Secret Service, you can bet, is still going to be spending resources monitoring his whereabouts. He's had to hand over his cell phone information about the cars he's driving, things of that nature. And he's supposed to stay within a 50-mile radius. Now, the judge can still undo this if he isn't compliant. But you're right. There have been a couple of occasions where he said he was going to do one thing, he went and did another. He went to the bookstore, one of those occasions, and looked at a section on the assassination of Reagan, which is a little bit chilling.
Yeah. There's great cynicism in me about this. How much of this do you think has to do with the fact that Nancy Reagan died here in the last 4 or 5 months?
Some could argue there are external factors. He is arguably a very unique condition. Hinckley, some have said, set back the cause of mental illness because the stereotype that it's violent necessarily. The judge, we have to presume the judge is trying to do the right thing here. The government wanted more restrictions on Hinckley. They wanted, for instance, an ankle monitoring bracelet. The judge did not order that, based primarily on the advice of Hinckley's treaters that he was a low flight risk and was going to stigmatize and delay his recovery. So, who knows? I mean, anything's possible, but I don't think that alone, if at all, is the explanation here.
Quentin, help me with this. The case is unusual because it involved, obviously, an assassination attempt on the President of the United States. But is this unusual in your experience, where someone would spend this amount of time in a health treatment facility and then suddenly be declared not a risk anymore and released? Does that happen a lot?
Well, the original order for his confinement, he was found not guilty because he was insane, and his confinement was until basically he was cured. And the language wasn't exactly to that degree, but the finding has been that he has been rehabilitated, that he doesn't have any violent tendencies, and he's not, a risk of danger to anybody at this time. Now, is that finding necessarily correct? We don't know, but that's the finding that's been made now.
The judge is Paul Friedman. Does he have a history of doing things like this, to your knowledge?
he was appointed by Judge Clinton, by President Clinton. He's a very thoughtful judge. He is a former prosecutor himself, I believe. So he is a good, thoughtful judge. His order is 103 pages long. He goes in detail through his reasoning and the factors he's considered, and he's opposed a number of restrictions. I mean, he's got to not get on the internet, no access to social media without unanimous approval of his treatment team. He's got to go to weekly therapy, monthly outpatient treatments. He has to volunteer to work 3 times a week. He can't get on the media. He can't give interviews. He can't contact victims. Can't drink alcohol, possess weapons. And if he screws up, the judge can revoke and send him back. So it's not as though there's not going to be monitoring of him. There will be very close monitoring of him, particularly early on. He's going to live with his 90-year-old mother, by the way, in Williamsburg, Virginia.
Chatting with Quentin Brogdon, former prosecutor in Houston, now is a very successful attorney in the Dallas area. Well, it sounds like the federal government, in other words, you, me, taxpayers, are going to be paying a lot of money to have this guy watched. That's what it sounds like.
Well, no doubt that is part of what's going to be happening. The Secret Service is going to have to be expending resources to watch him. They're not going to stand down. I mean, they've said that publicly, and they've been filing, documenting. They have been watching him when he's been released in these other occasions.
You sound skeptical about this whole thing. I mean, I just sense it in your voice that you, who have seen justice on both sides of the equation, you sound skeptical of this. I'm skeptical about it. Are you?
Well, I think the public is largely skeptical. A lot of the coverage has been that way. I believe in the jury system. I mean, those of us who toil in the trenches and see it. There was an 8-week trial. We didn't hear everything that jury heard back in 1982. They heard from experts on both sides. The government argued he did this just to seek fame. His defense lawyers put on experts who said basically he was insane. And the jury decided he was insane. We can second guess it.
Yeah.
Maybe they got it wrong, but more times than not, jurors get it right. And we've got to assume the judge, likewise, has heard from experts, and he's well-intentioned, and maybe the judge has gotten it wrong, but hopefully he hasn't, for all of our sakes.
I just see it from the family's point of view. I mean, the president came within a hair's breadth of being killed. His press secretary eventually died of the injuries that were sustained that day, bullet in the head. You had officers from the D.C. police who was severely hurt. Secret Service agent was hurt. There was just a lot of destruction that was done that day, and certainly it could have been even more so had Ronald Reagan passed away. I just from my standpoint, Quentin, I just see it from so many different sides that this guy is now walking the street. And if the guy and if there's anybody that probably needs protection right now, it's Jodie Foster, who this guy was trying to impress. But from what I can understand and from what I'm hearing from you is that these medical minds inside this facility feel like he is no longer a threat. And the judge had well, he probably had a choice, but he probably erred that side, saying, okay, if you say that, then this is what I should do. Maybe it's just a legal system run amok, but it just seems to me that it's troubling to me. It just is. That's all.
The fight that the federal government had was with the judge, or the debate, I guess is more accurate word, wasn't so much about whether he would be released. It was about the conditions of that release and what kinds of conditions would be imposed on him, specifically ankle monitoring, and whether he had any realistic expectation of any continuing privacy. The government said he's going to be out. He should have zero expectation of privacy going forward. Yeah. And the judge tried to balance those concerns, but even the government wasn't saying he can't be out at all. And so I think that's a telling a point in this whole debate or analysis is the government's position.
Yeah. Well, Quentin Brogdon, thank you so much for your time. If anybody needs any legal help down there in the Dallas area, how do they get a hold of you?
They look on our website at crainlewis, CRAINLEWIS.com.
Okay.
Thank you for having me, Ken.
Yeah, and you tell those Cowboys take it easy on the Bengals when we go down there, okay?
I will do.
All right. Thank you.